and welcome to our May Leadership Lunch and Learn. I'm Julie Robinson with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service in the Community Professional and Economic Development Department. And we're so glad that you've taken time during your lunch hour to join us. Today, we're going to hear on the topic of facilitating communication as we lead. And our guest speaker is Dr. Christy Farner. She is a Program and Staff Development Extension, Program and Staff Development Extension Specialist with the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service. And so as the Program and Staff Development Extension Specialist, Dr. Farner coordinates ongoing internal professional development to support Extension employees. And Christy specializes in curriculum development, mentoring, facilitation, and onboarding of UGA Cooperative Extension employees. She also coordinates organizational development efforts for UGA Extension related to staff development for county Extension faculty and state specialists, and represents Extension on the UGA Public Service and Outreach Facilitation Academy and Faculty Scholarship Academy. In addition to all of that, in her spare time, Dr. Farner also partners with state specialists on grants as a process expert, bridging research with outreach through the county delivery system. She is a triple dog, as she says, with her bachelor's and master's degree in child and family development and a PhD in adult education, all with the University of Georgia. So very excited to have Dr. Farner join us today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her and not take up any more of her time. So Dr. Farner.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. It is so great to be with you. Good afternoon or good day, whatever time zone you happen to be in and joining us today. I'm so excited and honored to be with you to share a little bit of insight that I have, and I hope that this is a helpful time as we all are learning every day. I feel like during the pandemic, we learned even more every day about how to communicate in different ways. And so today I'll be doing some things that I would do with my typical participants. Also, I'll kind of be pulling that curtain back like in Oz to explain a little bit of the behind the scenes that are things for you to consider as you are thinking about how you're facilitating different types of conversations. So with that, I'm going to start my presentation. All right. So today, we're going to talk about some different aspects of communicating and meeting our participants where they're at. And so we're going to talk about how we communicate best, focusing on exploring different facilitation methods to online participants, to face-to-face interactions, going back and forth, kind of sharing a little bit of insight about both as we go. And as Dr. Robinson mentioned, we'll try to make this as interactive as possible, given that it's the webinar format. And with that, I think we're going to just jump into our first icebreaker. And so this in the chat, there should be a link that's posted for you. And I am going to share, this is Mentimeter that we're using. And as you fill in the blank for I feel blank, if I have to lead a meeting, as you participate in this, our word cloud should create. So I'll give you all a minute to click on the link and put in a few words for I feel blank if I have to lead a meeting. Nervous, anxious, confident. Great, keep them coming. I love word clouds to get to see the variety and what is in common with what people say. So if you're not familiar with word clouds, the more times somebody might say the same word, it's going to make it bigger in our word cloud. And so you can see the variety. All right, so we have some comfortable, we have fine, happy. It looks like we have some on both ends. So some feel empowered and some are feeling a little bit anxious. So keep those coming for another second, and then we'll jump back into talking about how we are gonna get a pulse on people. And that I think is an important part of this, right? As one, to interact with each other, two, to kind of figure out where people are at and try to meet them where they are so that you can have the best type of interaction as possible. And this is just one way to do that. So thank you for participating in that. And feel free to keep adding if you would like, if you hadn't had a chance yet. And I'm going to jump back in to our next section. So with getting a pulse. So there's lots of different reasons as leaders that we are going to have to communicate with participants, audiences. You might be a speaker, you might be leading a meeting, you might be sharing your expertise at somebody else's meeting, you might be bringing other people into a group, or it could just be, you know, your regular office meeting. So we have a lot of different reasons why it's good to think about how do we facilitate those situations and how do we really understand who our audience is to really customize that experience. And as you're designing your interactions, it's really important to think about this as you're designing what your meeting is going to be like. So with this, we just did the word cloud as an icebreaker. And then also we had the poll. And so that's another way to get at some information about where people at that you're meeting with. So these are just two different ways, different examples of how you can get a pulse on the people that are in the meeting with you. And sometimes you would want the poll so you can see every single person's answer, whereas the word cloud, you're getting a general feel, and you might want to customize that to just be one answer per person instead of 3 or something like that, so that you can look at this in different ways depending on what kind of feel are you trying to understand from your participants. So one of the things that I use a lot when I'm in a meeting instead of a webinar in Zoom is the Annotate Tools. This is what it looks like. And it's a way that when I am sharing my screen, whether it's a PowerPoint, whether it is a using the whiteboard in Zoom, that it's a way that I can get participation from people in a lot of different ways, whether it's I'm putting 2 things up on the screen and saying, you know, which do you like better, Coke or Pepsi? And they put a little stamp there and I can clear it, and then I can do the next slide and do something different, or we can all be working together on something on a whiteboard. But it's a way that we can have people interact and feel like they're a part of this conversation in ways that sometimes when we're online doesn't work as well. If you're in person, this is what might be on a flip chart. And you might have people using sticky notes or markers or doing something with the flip chart in the room to interact. And so I can kind of look at that. The whiteboard feature of Zoom is something that is your virtual flip chart, if you will. There's also a lot of other types of virtual flip chart type things, such as I use Mural a lot. And I just use the free version, or do a trial with it. There's educational trials, things like that. You can definitely do paid versions. There are so many different tools out there. I think part of it is just figuring out what is the word that I need to look up to see what type of different companies have that type of product, and then see what things might be supported by your company, by your organization, or what you can justify paying for, or seeing if a free version of things work. With the Mentimeter, I just use the free one. You can only use 1 slide at a time, but I make it work because I don't use it that often to justify it. So I know that we all kind of have to balance out what we want to do, how much funds we have, how often are we using things. So I just wanted to show you how you can utilize something free, but of course, paid versions of things have a lot more capacities for you. So with this, just you can, do circles, stamps with Annotate. The one thing that I would say is that having being able to clear it is really important, because some people might not realize that what they're stamping on their screen, everybody else can see. So that's something that they might start drawing something all over your screen as you're talking about a next slide or something like that. So learning how to turn those things on and off can really make a a difference. Also, I think when you're talking about using any kind of online tools, it's really important to think about who's your audience, how technically savvy are they, what kind of device are they going to be on? Do you need to send out instructions ahead of time and let them practice on something ahead of time versus they're going to learn how to use something in your meeting? Or is this you're working with people within a program and organization that already know how to use certain types of tools. So for them just to jump in and use it wouldn't be a big deal. Sometimes I'll do a virtual icebreaker ahead of time and send them a mural board where I ask them to do a couple different things to introduce themselves using features that I want to use later. And then everybody can look at that ahead of time and get to know each other outside of our meeting, and they're going to feel more comfortable when you're going to use it for other purposes during the meeting. Just something to think about there. All right, so I don't know what other people call it. I call it a production manager. When you are in a physical room, oftentimes we have learned to kind of scan the room, to be handing things out, walking around and kind of listening to small groups, doing all sorts of things at the same time in a physical room that I don't know about you, but I have found I cannot do as many things when I am online. I need help. I need somebody to be managing a weight room, to be copying and pasting something into a chat, to troubleshoot with somebody if a participant needs help, and yeah, mute and unmute people. Luckily, I haven't heard as much about Zoom bombing things lately. I think security's gotten better, but I know, a couple months ago, you had to be really careful about that. And so having other people to have your back is huge. So I appreciate Rita so much. Rita is doing magic for me today and playing music and sharing a poll so that I don't have to worry about those things and I can just worry about talking with you. So if you have not tried that out before, this can be any type of person that, and depending on their skill level, you can manage how much somebody is helping, or multiple people. Today, I feel like doing virtual facilitation takes more of a village than the in-person training can be sometimes. So, and I see Dr. Robinson shaking her head. She knows it's a different world, right? So I think balancing that support, sometimes it could just be a co-facilitator. So if Dr. Robinson and I were just the only two people here, while she was talking, I would be doing the production manager stuff. While I was talking, she would be doing it. And that you can get people that just like somebody who just helps with chat, or anything that you can do to kind of look at the resources of the people that you have and what they would be comfortable with to help can make a huge difference. So I really recommend that. And the best way to do this is just practice. With a lot of the virtual facilitation, you just have to practice this. Get on with a couple other people, practice sharing your screen, practice doing breakout rooms, monitoring a weight room, taking turns doing that, because unfortunately, what you see it as a presenter and what your participants see are different. So it's hard to explain to somebody how to do something when they can't see it themselves. So, I mean, just practice, practice, practice. And I know that might seem a little basic, but I just, because also, all of these tools are changing all the time. How many times is there an update on a program, and where something was isn't anymore? And so the more we practice, I think the more comfortable we get with it, and the more we can play around with nuances, such as like being able to just play your music from your computer without sharing your whole screen. When I figured that out, it was a game changer that I could create that environment online like I would like to have in person. When we're in a physical space, there's parts of the environment that are built in, how much sunlight, or you can change the temperature, or you can, do decorations. But when you're in a virtual environment, it's a lot harder to create that culture and that feel. And to me, it's just amazing how a little bit of music before and after things work. I've created a Zoom playlist on Spotify that I think we'll be sharing at some point if you want it to. And I'll play different music. Again, knowing your audience makes a big difference, because with certain groups of people, it's fun to be punny. So I have, come to my window, or you come back from a breakout room and it's like, there's no sunshine when you're gone. My personal favorite is at the end of a meeting to do bye, 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 and sync. But again, it depends on your participants. Some people are going to appreciate those types of things, and other people are going to feel like it is not appropriate for the level of professionalism that they are looking for in that meeting. But having all of this in your toolkit, I think really helps you to pull out the right tools for the right purpose. And whether it's in person or whether it's going to be online, I think it's how do you want people to walk away and feel from that interaction? I think that's the biggest point. You know, things are going to go wrong sometimes. It doesn't matter how professional and how expert somebody is, something will go wrong. But how have they connected and make you feel? And are you walking away like your time was valuable is something that's important. Oh, so icebreakers. So we did the word cloud as an icebreaker. Icebreakers, energizers. Sometimes if you have a long meeting, whether it's in person or online, you need to kind of pump up the volume a little bit, especially after lunch, or you and so thinking about what are some ways that we can move our body, that we can stimulate our minds in different ways. I find online sometimes going into some quick breakout rooms to have people talk one-on-one for a minute or in a small group and then jump back in. I notice a big difference in how they're energized in the room. Also online, we could say, all right, when you're doing this activity or when you think of an answer, move to a certain side of your screen and have them physically move in their screen, or do some chair yoga, you know, or just moving your eyes away from the screen in different directions. Or you can say, where in the world is Julie? And everybody point on their screen where Julie is, and you'll see that everybody's pointing in a different direction, and it helps you realize that everybody's seeing something a little bit different. Also, you know, think about when you're doing your energizers, especially in person, about physical ability, kind of keep that in mind. But there are ways to do physical things in person or online. There are ways to just stimulate our minds and take that little break in some different ways and get to know each other better. And I think that can be a really important part of our time together as you try to figure out what you want to do in your meeting. Think about what's the purpose of your meeting and tie in your energizers or your icebreakers to be things that are going to be helpful to what you want to do for the main content. So if I am going to be doing something about having a group come together for idea generation, I might do something by pulling out a paper clip and having everybody take 2 minutes to write down all the ideas they have for uses of a paper clip. And then we go around the room and everybody shares one until all the unique ideas are gone, right? It's a safe way to get people to think outside the box and to show that different people think about things in different ways. Somebody's very practical, somebody's very creative, and how collectively we all had more ideas than any one person did. And that's really setting that stage for that next activity that I want them to do. So there's, I think, intentional ways to do that. I also have an virtual icebreaker resource that we'll be sharing with you as well, that just has a couple different sources of ideas in case you're looking for something new. Again, energizing icebreakers movement are not always appropriate, but it's good to understand the differences and have ideas for all of those so that you can know when to pull those out and in what way. Another way that I like to do things is have some sort of image, or when you look at a map, there are so many different ways that you can utilize something. So I think about this, you know, if we were in a meeting and I was using Annotate, I could say, you know, put a stamp on every state you've been to, or where were you born? Or if you could, you know, had a plane ticket to go anywhere in the US today, where would you want to go? There's different ways that you can use things like that to help learn some different things about people, or to find that there's something in common. Another thing that I like to do for an energizer is to do a virtual scavenger hunt for a minute. So I would say, okay, find something around, you know, around your office that makes you happy. And I would pull out a pretty little calendar, or find something that is shiny. And then, everybody's scrambling around, it gets a little bit of movement, or find something that represents you. And I have a little flamingo because I love flamingos. So that's another way to get people to kind of have a little bit more energy as they're going. There's just so many different ways that you can do it. So I encourage you to talk to people who also do this. Lots of places online that you can find ideas, and just consider that as we go. All right, the other thing that I think is really important at the beginning of a meeting is, what are the expectations and ground rules? So I have some of my favorites, but I think it's important to also hear from the other people that are in a meeting. So if we're able to turn the chat on for a second, is that all right with us? And I can have them put in the chat, what's one or two expectations of like what you would want to get out of today? What's an expectation that you have for me? What's an expectation that you have for yourself? Maybe you're in the middle of eating and your expectation is, I'm going to listen in the background. That's fine. Maybe you're like, I want to fully be participating and active in this. So thinking about what are your expectations, and being able to put that in a chat is a way that people can learn about what kind of expectations that they have, for each other, for themselves, and for the people who are leading the meeting. And then also, I think it's important to think about how much time you're going to have. Are you going to be around these people a lot? Are you going to have meetings over and over? Is this a one-time thing? So Dr. Robinson is having these types of lunch and learns all the time. So, but I'm just popping in this one time to share a few minutes with you. So I wouldn't have the ground rules and expectations in this session like I would if we were going to be in a meeting where we're more interactive. But I look at it kind of like a prenup, that you want to figure these things out beforehand, before there's trouble. Just like in a marriage, you'd want to figure that out on the front end. And then also, I think especially in face-to-face meetings, that if you set up some ground rules at the beginning, you're really able to help each other kind of police those rules. If you're coming up with them together, if everybody's agreeing upon them, then other people can call people out on things, and it doesn't just have to be on you in front of the room. But also that gives you a place to have that conversation, whether you need to have it in front of everybody or pull somebody off to the side to have a difficult conversation about, hey, I thought we agreed to these. What's going on? Is there a way we can move forward and, honor the rule, the commitment that we had at the beginning of this meeting. And so that can be really helpful. So here is a couple. So expectations for online meetings you might want to send out ahead of time would be, do you expect people to have their camera on or off? How to handle questions. So at the beginning, Julie said, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. Other times in a meeting, you might want people to unmute. Other times you might want people to put it in a chat, wait to the end, go ahead and do it as you want. Sometimes people can use the chats in different ways too. So maybe you want people to have kind of those side conversations while you're talking and make it feel more interactive. So if I said something that was helpful, somebody might type in, oh, that was a great point, or oh man, yeah, I did that once and it really made a difference. But then sometimes you don't want any of that chat. And so you might, there's too many people in a meeting or something, and you might want to turn the chat off. So thinking about how you're utilizing things, what you want to share ahead of time and what you want to share during the meeting to set up those expectations and ground rules can be really helpful. And you want to decide, are you deciding on some ground rules you're sharing with people? Are you letting them come up with them? Is it a combination? And there's a lot of different ways that you can work that process. But I think we often skip this step, and it's not until there's a problem in the meeting that you are regretting skipping it. So with Georgia Cooperative Extension, we talk about ourselves as a family. And we have, a listserv across the organization, and they will say, Bob's brother's cousin is, getting married or had a baby, or there was a death in the family, and people send cards. It really feels like a family. So oftentimes when I'm in a training, I talk about us as a family, and these are our house rules, and these different guests that are coming in are going to be like guests in our house. So how do we want to respect them, and talk about, if we're going to spend 3 days together. I just finished a 3-day training today. I was like, what are the house rules that we want to get together with? And so there's a lot of different ways you can talk about it, but again, it depends on your audience. So here's a couple of my favorites that might be a little bit off the wall. So one is to treat the speaker like a house guest. I just explained kind of how I tie that one in. The rule of 3, I personally need for myself, so I always recommend it. But it's letting 3 people talk before somebody talks again. And that way the louder people in the room aren't dominating, and it encourages maybe the quieter people to speak up again, so that you're hearing from more voices. Stoves is my favorite. So picture a stove in your head. So what is the stove you're looking at? It might be in the kitchen, it might be a camping stove, it might be gas. So the idea is that we say these words a lot, but people have different meanings for it. So to have that ability to call out when you think somebody's thinking about something different makes a difference. Also, oops, ouch is if somebody says something and it's hurtful to you, or you're offended by it, say ouch, like out loud in the meeting, and then other people can say oops as kind of like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. So those are just a couple of fun ones. Connecting with the participants. I talked a little bit about mural and Mentimeter already. I have an example up here. I know a lot of people on this have done colors before, true colors. And so this is how I've done it online with virtual flip charts. So really playing around with some of those different virtual tools can really make you feel like you are in the room as much as possible when you can't be there. And so think about generations, race, ethnicity, gender, learning styles, personality types. When I like to think about a dance, are you just inviting people to the dance? Are you inviting them onto the dance floor? Are you asking them what type of music they prefer that you can include in that dance? Different ways to think about it. What level are you including different types of people? And I think is really important. So I went through that a little bit fast, but I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for some questions, because oftentimes I feel like I try to share too much information because I get so excited about what we're doing. And I just wanted to make sure that I didn't try to share too much information at once, so that we could really spend some time on what you care about.
All right, Dr. Farner, thank you so much. I'm going to have you answer some questions that we've got. The first one is, usually with ground rules, they like to encourage people to put their video on. And I know that a lot of our Zoom folks here in Arkansas are very pro video. However, someone had recently pointed out to this person that some people need the camera to be off for a variety of reasons, privacy or accessibility, or you name it. How have you been handling, or how would you propose handling if having your camera on is a ground rule, but this person can't?
I think that's a great question. And I know in a lot of rural areas that connectivity can be a huge issue. So they just don't have the bandwidth to have that screen on and be having a good feed or things like that. Or I've found that in some of the cases, if we put things in a chat, they're not able to download those. So especially if I'm doing a full day meeting, even if it's short, but it's something really important, I try to find out ahead of time, or at least at the beginning of that meeting, if anybody's having issues with that, so that we can have a production manager email those same documents, because they're able to get the email faster than they can get it in a platform like Zoom. I think especially during this, pandemic times, just trying to be open, honest, and very transparent and genuine about it, and say, look, we're all doing a whole bunch of different things right now as an organization or as a program, fill in the blank, the type of group you're with. Our expectation is that you're going to have your camera on. However, we understand that, things are going to come up, or sometimes that Zoom fatigue is really setting in. Different personality types can get really drained in different ways by that. So I think, especially thinking about how long your meeting's going to be online, I say, if you need to turn your camera off from time to time, we understand that. We're all adults here, and we're just, we're trying to meet each other where we're at. So I'm going to trust that when you can, you're going to put your camera on so that we can interact. That I really want to see you, that seeing each other is so important to me. And I understand that sometimes that's just not an option. Sometimes also I'll say, if you have reasons why you're not going to be able to use it at all, like, let me know. And you can decide on whether that's ahead of time, whether they do a chat, a text message, whatever type of meeting you're in, it would make a difference. But I'll have people to say, hey, I'm an extension agent. I'm the only one in the office today. And there's, people are bringing in their soil samples or whatever it might be. We have camp registration due today. I'm going to have to step away. And when my camera's off, that's why. But I'm going to keep an earbud in and still be listening or whatever. So that I'll know also to try to not embarrass people. So I'm not going to try to call on somebody with their camera off unless I know that they're there. Because again, like, you want people to get the most out of the interaction and feel like they're respected too. So I just try to be honest and say, this is why anything that I'm asking, this is why we want to do this. Also, I think it depends on the group of their capability of, like, well, I'm only on a cell phone, or, I'm driving. I really don't want to watch people driving. That makes me very nervous. So yeah, so that's my long answer to the question.
All right. Our next question, and I can answer this one, although I'm sure Dr. Farner knows. Is it possible to turn off chat in a Zoom meeting? So, we're in webinar, and that's a whole other conversation or presentation, but there is a difference between Zoom meeting and Zoom webinar, and this person's wanting to know if you can turn off chat in a Zoom meeting, and yes, you can. And I am going to try, I think, yeah, so I'm putting the link for Zoom support in the chat if you want to go find out how you can turn the chat off in a Zoom meeting. And as Dr. Farner has mentioned, there's a lot of reasons why you may want to do that, and just be very transparent about why that's a expectation or a meeting requirement for you. Dr. Farner, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, and I would say being clear with the people about how you're using it or why you have it on or off is really helpful. And then kind of along those lines too, I use the naming part a lot for online meetings. Now, most of my meetings are with adults. If I was working with youth, I don't know that I would want them to have the capability to change their name, because they might take advantage of that or get distracted or inappropriate. But with the adults that I work with, sometimes it's really helpful for us to, hey, go in and change your name to say just your first name, or just your last name, or your organization or program area, or something that is helpful to the, if you have people from a lot of different organizations on, or say it's an alumni meeting and you want to know what class everybody was in of the same program. So I really use the renaming function a lot. You can do it where the hosts are the only ones that can rename people, or you can let people rename themselves. I know something that's much more common these days is if people put their pronouns up there, or you put, there's just so many different ways that I think even just the naming piece can make a difference. I want us to connect on the same level. I'm just Christy. So, I don't have doctor before my name and my big title and all that, because in some meetings it matters and titles matter. And that's important to put up there, knowing your audience there. So not exactly the chat, but I just wanted to kind of mention another feature that I think if you're thinking through ahead of time, being intentional about how you're using things, it can really help. The same with breakout rooms. You can choose to let people choose their own breakout room, but they have to have the most updated version of Zoom, or one of the more recent ones to be able to do it. So sometimes I want them to choose. If we're doing true colors and they just figured out what color they are and we're going to go into breakout rooms for each color, I would like to be able to just say, okay, here are the 4 colors, go pick the room you want, and realize that some people aren't going to be able to do it. And then I could just move them after the fact. Or I might just say, rename yourself and put your color first. And then it's really easy for a production manager to put them into a breakout room quickly because it's sorting them alphabetically. So there's some different ways you can do this based on the functionality. I know when I'm doing a breakout room with something more complicated in Mural, like we did strategic planning for Master Gardener program. And so I had somebody trained for each breakout room to know how to use Mural. They could share their screen. They could do it for everybody, just like one person's holding a marker for a flip chart. Other groups, when I'm doing it with our extension agents who I know are more familiar with it, you put the link in the chat, they can all get into that Mural room, and it's like they all have their own marker. So kind of knowing what kind of audience you have there too, how technically savvy they are, their connectivity, is somebody calling in? There's some things that you can have a person calling in participate in, other things that would feel very like they're excluded if you're doing something that they just can't connect with. So those are some other ways to kind of different functionalities.
All right, another question. You've obviously had a lot of success with transitioning meetings from face-to-face to online. What have been some of your most difficult meetings what have been the most difficult meetings for you to transition into that online space?
Well, I would say early on, we were just all trying to learn things. And some people like Dr. Robinson had been doing online things way longer than the rest of us. And, but the rest of us were just trying to figure it out as we go. So also, I think because so many people were doing online meetings all at one time during this unique time, a lot of these companies changed their functionalities much faster and became much better than their normal time frame of changing things. So I think like early on in the pandemic, when we were starting to transition, things that were clunkier. There wasn't the functionalities that we have today. So that was a struggle. When you could only have one person to manage a breakout room, was really hard when you have a team that's on here trying to do different things. I think for me, the hardest thing is when I can't see faces. I really need that nonverbal communication to see if people are distracted, are they bored, are they confused? And so when I can't see faces, that is the hardest thing for me, because it's just like all my energy is sucked into this black hole. and and then I'm just so much more exhausted at the end of the day. I think some of the tips around that too is playing with your view. You can change the view on Zoom to whether you're seeing like the Brady Bunch grid. You can change it to just see the presenter. You can change the size of your screen. When it goes into the full screen mode, you can escape out of that and change the size of your screen. So you're choosing, do I want a PowerPoint bigger? Do I want to see more people? As a leader and facilitating things, I want to see all the people more than I want to see the size of that presentation, because I'm trying to gauge everybody's nonverbal communication. If I'm just worried about the content and I'm more of the participant, or I just need a break for a minute, I'm going to switch the mode where I'm just seeing the presenter to give myself a little bit of a break. But I think that, and just trying to figure out how do you do an agenda that was in person and move it online. You can't just copy and paste it. I mean, you can, but I would not recommend it. I know we've all been in some terrible virtual meetings, and I feel like you need interaction more often when you're online. You need breaks more frequently. You need those like energizer, just different ways to use different parts of your senses. How are you taking things in? How are you interacting? Are you just sitting and listening and like falling asleep? And so I feel like that that was the hardest part of figuring, well, how long can I go without before I have a break? how often during a session do I need to interact? And so that changed how I did a lot of things. In person, typically, doing a 3-day meeting where it's like 2 half days, 1 full day in the middle makes sense. Online, it would make much more sense to do like 2 hours every morning for that week or something instead of an all day Zoom. And so balancing that out, and when we already have schedules that are already built in, sometimes you have to work within the parameters that were set to be in person, and then you've just got to make it work. But doing those chunks differently, I think was like one of the hardest transition, because it's like you just shouldn't copy and paste one agenda from one way to the other.
All right. Wonderful. Well, Dr. Farner, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing not only your insights, but also your materials. Certainly want to thank all of our participants for joining us today.